welcome to YTV. Our subject for today is crime and violence. My name's Andrew Gillie, and today I'll be speaking with Louis Harrell, who is a program coordinator at St. Francis Hill Outreach Center. He also has experience working at the Orange County Juvenile Facility in Los Angeles, California. Good evening, Mr. Harrell.
Hi, how are you this evening?
My first question for you, I guess, is about how long the gangs have been a part of Pittsburgh. We've been hearing more and more about this over the past year. Is this a new problem?
No, it's not a new problem at all. At St. Francis, we recognized that there were gangs in the area back around 1988 or so. Now, again, I'm not saying that we were the first to recognize that there were gangs in Pittsburgh, but that's when we discovered it. In fact, I believe that if we discovered it in '88, I'm kind of afraid to, to even speculate how long they've actually been here. At the time, they were calling themselves posses, and then eventually they moved into calling themselves gangs. But they've been here for quite some time.
What is a gang? I know we hear that word a lot. What does that mean?
Actually, the word is tricky because, I've noticed that the word gang always seems to indicate something negative. And recently, it appears that whenever they use the word gang, it's always related to African American kids. I noticed that most of the, the other groups that are functioning, for example, they always call neo-Nazi groups and organizations. They never refer to them as being gangs. The same thing with the skinheads, and of course the same thing with what the oldest gang is that ever walked the streets of the United States, which is the Ku Klux Klan. They have never been referred to as a gang, but indeed that's exactly what they are. So the word gang always has a negative connotation dealing with intimidation, criminal activity, and of course violence.
What are some of the reasons why kids would join a gang? What purpose does that serve for the kids?
Well, the kids that I speak to, most of them talk about the fact that they look for the kind of things that they would look for in a family. This is what they get from joining the gang: togetherness, belongingness, acceptance, esteem, some sort of a belonging to a group of kids who they feel will support them. That's not what they're getting at home. At least they don't feel that that's what they're getting at home. And that's exactly what they're getting out of gang. And we mustn't forget that they also get free drugs and alcohol. So that's also a connection too.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know of your work with the drug and alcohol program at St. Francis. What is the connection between drug use and being in gangs?
I'm seeing it as being a major correlation. Of course, we never did any research on that as directly, how directly gangs and drugs or violence and drugs do tie in. But what we're seeing at the program is that it's a direct correlation. And that's really nothing new because we do know that the aggravated assault records if you would go down and look at the police records, most of the aggravated assault cases or simple assault cases, you always find alcohol or drugs behind it. The same is true with domestic abuse or sexual abuse. You always seem to find chemical dependency behind it. So that's nothing new. So the kids who get involved in using drugs and alcohol, they are a target for being members of gangs, street gangs.
The gang structure in Pittsburgh, you hear the words like the Crips and the Bloods. Are the gangs in Pittsburgh related to these national gangs? Is there any connection with those, or are they individualized?
They're independent. They're not really connected with national gangs. Most of the gangs that are here have developed because of territorial reasons. Some have developed because of money reasons, but the majority of them are developed because of the territorial situation. A lot of kids are now starting to become more attracted to the gangs because of protection, because it's almost more, it's safer at this point to belong to a gang than it is to not belong to a gang. At least that's the way they perceive it. But they're not national gangs. These are all local, homeborn gangs.
How would a parent or another person of someone's age know if either their son or daughter or maybe their friend was starting to get involved in a gang? Are there any kind of signs or?
You know, actually, there's lots of signs, but you know, we noticed that the parents aren't really, and the kids will say it as well. You know, parents aren't really in tune to what kids are doing. I think that parents have to start paying attention to who their peer group is. You know, in other words, when parents start seeing kids that they know have been around for a long time start to disappear, or the kids that will come around and sit down and eat dinner with them and would hold conversations with them, call the house and hold a conversation with the parent before they ask for the kid, all of a sudden they start disappearing, and all of a sudden they start hearing voices on the telephone that they don't recognize. Kids start hanging out in areas outside of their neighborhoods, or start hanging in areas where they know that kids who are more negative hang out. You know, that's telling you right there that there's something going on. If a kid is wearing a common color, whether it's blue, black, orange, pink, purple, it doesn't matter what color it is. If a kid is always wearing that color, there's a chance that he could be connected. A nickname that comes out of nowhere, graffiti in his bedroom or on his notebooks, things of that sort. Scars that come out of nowhere that look like they're either self-induced or someone else put them there with some pattern is definitely an indication the kid could be getting involved in street gang activity.
How much of a problem is this outside of the city? Is this something that I, living in the suburbs, don't really need to worry about, or is this growing and spreading out?
Oh yeah, it's out there. It's everywhere. You know, there's seeds of it being planted in almost every community in Western Pennsylvania, regardless of whether people want to accept it, believe it, or whatever. It's out there. It may not be called Crips or Bloods, but the mentality of the gang mentality is out there. And it's happening because of the same reasons that it's happened in the city. For the fact that kids aren't getting what they need at home, and for the fact that drugs and alcohol is a big part of it, and because they're getting things, they feel a need to retaliate against groups that are coming into their communities, you know, starting trouble. So, you know, all these factors, you put them all in the pot, and, you know, by the time you get finished cooking it, you got a gang situation. Regardless of whether you want to call it that or not, it's a gang.
So it's something we all need to think about.
Whoever doesn't think about it, then it's going to hit them like a ton of bricks, because it's in every community. And the pattern that's starting actually in the suburbs is that kids may not be starting gangs right there in their community, but they're going to other communities and they're claiming that turf. So they're identifying with gangs that may be in some of the outer line areas or boroughs, and they think that they're not bringing that activity back into the community, but they are.
What can we do about it? Is there any way to slow this down, to slow down the violence, to kind of help these kids find other ways of doing things?
Well, the first thing we have to do is, first of all, try to narrow the gap between kids and adults. It's a wide gap right now. You know, I mean, there's kids that could come in here and hold a conversation, and you would not know a word that they were talking about. You have to pay attention to things like that. I think it's crazy to believe that we don't have to learn their language. Yes, we do, and we have to learn it the same way that we expect them to learn ours. Kids feel discounted right now. We gotta get that out. We got to start letting kids know that we do accept them. We want to help them learn other alternative ways to dealing with their anger, their loneliness, their rejection, or whatever it is that they're feeling. But we want to be there for them. We want to assist them in dealing with some of the issues that may not be traditional therapeutic issues, or may not be traditional community issues. We want to assist them in dealing with those things. Kids just need to know that there's someone that's there that will care. And that's part of the problem. But the first thing that the community needs to do is get educated. You got to get educated about what this whole gang thing is about, why it happens, where it happens, and how it happens.
I know you're very involved with the gang conference that's coming up in Pittsburgh. What's that about? And what I'm real curious about is, why did they pick Pittsburgh?
Well, actually, Pittsburgh was picked because of the activity, the gang activity that's going on here in Pittsburgh right now. There are actually gangs in other cities that are just not doing what Pittsburgh is doing. You have to remember, Pittsburgh is a very slow city, and we get things maybe 5-10 years later. And you know, only thing we get is we'll come through the airport, because we never start any trends. We just follow them. We'll probably get angry about Rodney King next summer, you know, because we're that far behind. Okay, I think that Pittsburgh, because of its gang activity, because of the violence and the level that the violence is right now, we need a gang summit. coming here. And what it's going to do is that it's going to educate the kids that are here in Pittsburgh. It's going to educate them to understand that kids in other cities are doing different things now. They're not shooting each other and killing each other. They're now building businesses. They're trying to do things to uplift their community. They're doing things to assist the elderly. They're doing things to assist the kids that are still in school. For example, in certain parts of Los Angeles and Chicago, they don't even worry about the police or the security guarding the schools anymore. The Crips and Bloods are doing it, or the Vice Lords are doing it. And when kids aren't in class, why aren't you in class, boy? Well, you need to get there. You know, because they're taking it upon themselves now to be responsible for where these kids are going. And that's what Pittsburgh needs to understand. That's the only way we're going to make it if we start taking care of each other.
So it seems like they've kind of moved past the violent stage in other cities.
Exactly.
And we're still lagging back behind.
Exactly. And again, you know, Pittsburgh is slow. So what we're trying to do is to try to pick up the pace so that we don't have to go through 5, 10, or 15 years of bloodshed and just bloodbaths every year and losing kids and relatives to this violence that's in the street. And that's why we're bringing the gang summit here now, so that we can try to expedite, you know, the process of them getting beyond guns and drugs. We want to try to help them, number one, to make a different decision about drug use. We want to try to help them to make a different decision about violence. We want to try to help them to make a decision to uplift themselves along with their community.
Great. I hope it goes really well for you.
We're hopeful. We're hopeful. We're very hopeful.
What do you say to the people that are criticizing the gang conference? The people that are saying it shouldn't be in Pittsburgh, that we're inviting the gangs to come in and establish themselves here?
Well, again, you know, it comes down to education. You know, we fear that we don't know about. You know, it comes down to them being educated about just what is this gang summit going to do? What is the purpose of it? And it's interesting because everyone that's criticizing it, I haven't seen any of those people at any of the meetings. So there's no way that they could possibly know, you know, just what the intention of this gang summit is. They couldn't possibly know what it is. So only thing I can say is that the critics are going to say what they're going to say, but we have a mission, and I'm on a mission personally, you know, to try to help some of our kids stop dying. You know, we don't want any more of our kids dying. So, you know, I don't care about what the critics say at this point. We have to go forth and do what we have to do to try to save some lives.
Well, Mr. Harrell, if it's okay with you, I'd like to have a few of the kids ask you some questions now.
Sure.
Okay.
What are we supposed to do?
I don't know. We're done. That's well. What we've done is we've brought down some of the kids and asked them to give us, and particularly Mr. Harrell, questions that they might have about the gangs. And if anybody wants to start.
I guess I will. What are Vice Lords?
The Vice Lords is a gang out of Chicago, and there's different types of them. But right now, what they're doing in Chicago is interesting because they have what they call a project. It's called Project 21, and it's a 4-year project. And what they're doing is that they're training all of their younger members about city government, and they're encouraging them to vote. So in 4 years, when those 14 and 15-year-old kids will be 18 and 19 years old, they're going to vote for one of their members that they're having run for city council. So in about 3 years or so, there's going to be about 7,000 gang members that's going to be voting for one guy to get on city council. And this guy used to be their warlord, who was the one that actually ordered when there was going to be a gang war against another gang. So, you know, again, when we talk about Pittsburgh being behind, you know, these people are already using the political system to get things done, and Pittsburgh is still using guns.
What's the difference between a clique and a gang?
What's the difference between a clique and a gang? It's an interesting question. Actually, there's not a whole lot of difference, except probably for the fact that most of the street gangs, you know, they get together out of protection and generally to retaliate. Cliques get together because they have something in common. They just feel more comfortable hanging out with a bunch of kids who all have tails, or get together with a bunch of kids who all wear T-shirts as opposed to wearing preppy shirts or something. The street gang actually is there to protect their territory and to be aggressive toward other people.
the mafia and the yakuza, they were all organized crime. Is these gangs that are running around now that don't seem organized, are they more organized than people realize?
Yeah, they are. They are. It's a good question because I think that one of the fallacies that our city government made is that they were always described as being loosely organized. In fact, we denied the fact that we had gangs here in Pittsburgh for a number of years because the reason was because our city government says that, well, they're not organized, so they can't be a gang, when in fact they were fairly organized. Now, they're not as organized as they are on the West Coast. They're not as organized as they are in other areas, but they are somewhat organized. They're more organized than what Pittsburgh believes.
Are most gang members like high school dropouts, or people who just decided not to go to school anymore, like decided like after high school not to go to college? Are they people who decided to quit education?
No, not at all. In fact, in almost every Pittsburgh city school, and now even in the suburban schools, a lot of those kids are involved in gangs. And a lot of the schools that I go to, we generally hold meetings with the opposing gangs that are in that school. So at one time, we may have 70 or 80 students in one classroom that we're holding a meeting with to try to get them to cease fire or to stop violent incidents happening in school so that the schools can be safe. But these kids are going to school. A lot of them are getting good grades.
You spoke before about graffiti on notebooks or different things at home. What type of graffiti were you speaking of?
Well, usually the graffiti, and right now, the Pittsburgh gangs has its own alphabet. They call it the gang alphabet. And I don't have a blackboard or anything right now to really show you or to illustrate the way that they're doing letters that they're making distinct from the regular alphabet. But there's a lot of things that you may see on notebooks. For example, if you see a CR or a LK or a BK, and those things mean blood killer, Crip killer, or law killer. Those are different notes of graffiti that you may see. Or you may see numbers like 168 or 156 or 456, which indicates street blocks in different communities, and that's a set. A set, of course, is what gangs claim to be their territory.
Is there any relation to music, if any? What type of music, if there's any relation to them?
Well, I think the stereotype is that all gangbangers listen to what they call gangster rap, okay? But that's not always true. That's not always true. Now, obviously there's a lot of violence, that's being communicated in these particular records. But that's not to say that there's a direct correlation between the gangster rap music and gangs. I don't think there is.
What are like law agents and police and all that doing to try to stop this? Because like at schools and stuff, they say you can't wear this color or that color, but almost every gang has picked up all the colors that you can buy. So like what else are they doing that is like going to be effective?
When you find out the answer to that, please let me know, because I haven't found it yet. I don't know what police are doing to stop it. I do know that some police are trying to get more educated about it. I do know that. But as far as prevention, as far as intervention, I'm not really sure what they're doing to stop it. And I truly don't believe that putting more manpower out in the street is going to stop it. I don't believe that.
Do you honestly believe that there is a way to stop it?
At this point, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to stop it. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I do know the answer to stop it. I don't. But I think that there's a way that we can at least open up dialogue between kids and adults, or between kids and what we would consider to be community leaders. I think there's a way we can open up dialogue.
Is there a certain financial group where gangs try to hit? I mean, you don't see a lot of people living in high standard neighborhoods in gangs, do you?
Mm-hmm. Most certainly do.
Well, but the stereotype is these people are from the hood, the ghetto,
Bingo! Stereotype. You hit it on the nose. Stereotype. And they never call them gangs in the suburbs, but they are. Gangs. Like I said, the neo-Nazi groups, the skinheads, the different branches or groups of the KKK, and there's a lot of different groups out there, that are white groups that are gangs. But like you said, the stereotype is that they come from the hood. What's the hood? When you mention the word hood, what do you think of?
Well, where my friends think about, they think, where they live is the hood, like Hazelwood.
Uh-huh.
That's where they think the hood is.
Right.
Or Duquesne, that's the hood.
Right. And those are mostly concentrated by African Americans. Okay, but hood is anywhere where where people live. That's a hood. If you live in Fox Chapel, that's a hood. If you live in North Park, that's a hood. It's anywhere you live. If you claim it to be a hood, that's a hood. And yes, those areas do have groups that are violent. They are gangs.
Is there like parents are involved in the Ku Klux Klan or in the mafia? Are their kids inclined to be in the Bloods or the Crips?
I think it's a sick cycle. And yeah, well, see, here in Pittsburgh, we're fortunate because what we're seeing is first generation of hardcore gangbangers. I mean, Pittsburgh has probably had gangs here forever. I've only been living in Pittsburgh about 10 years, so I don't really know the whole history of Pittsburgh in terms of its neighborhoods and gangs. But I do know that almost every community, at one point or another have probably experienced some gangs. But we are experiencing here in Pittsburgh right now what we call the first generation of hardcore gangbanging. That means kids who carry guns and will use them, are not afraid to use them. That's hardcore gangbanging. Targeting kills and things of that sort. This is the first time Pittsburgh has seen that I'm aware of. So, I think that because of that, we probably have an advantage over other cities because we don't have our history in gangbanging is not as deeply entrenched, but it doesn't mean it's not out of control. It's definitely out of control.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, go ahead. Okay, because
I have one more.
Okay.
Is gangs into drugs? I mean, do most people in gangs grow up to be pimps and drug dealers and stuff like that? I'm just wondering,
I mean, your questions are good, and I really appreciate your honesty in even asking them. No, that's not true. That most gang members grow up to be pimps and drug dealers. I do think that, first of all, I don't know that many old gangbangers, because I don't think they live that long. Most of the kids that are inside the gangs that I deal with, these kids don't expect to live beyond 18, 19, 21 years of age. They don't even expect to live that long. I think that if we're lucky enough to get these kids out of active gang banging, I think that we can have serious, productive kids because they're very smart. They're very intelligent. We are not dealing with dummies out there. They're very intelligent and a very emotional group of kids. So it's not just because they're involved in the gang, it doesn't mean that they're going to be pimps and drug dealers for the rest of their life. It doesn't mean that. However, if they continue to be involved in gangs, there's nothing positive that's going to, it can't be anything positive that's going to come of it unless they decide to get out one day. They're either going to end up in jail or they're going to end up dead.
Well, if they don't expect to live that long, why do they stay in the gangs? Or, if they're so intelligent, why go in them in the first place when there's a greater chance of getting killed than there is staying alive? Because
their perception is that's the only way. Their perception is that is life. That is the way that they have to cope with life. It's not like the way that, in communities where the crime rate may not be as high, or the activity or the illegal activity may not be as high, or at least as overt. It's not like it is there. They feel like in order for them to survive, this is what they have to do.
Well, how do we show them that there is a better way?
By opening up dialogue with them, and that's some of the things that we do in our program, and that's some of the things that with some of the people that I associate with or my colleagues, some of the things that they try to do is to open up dialogue with them. But it does take, them getting to the point where they can trust you enough to at least listen to you, or even talk with you to let you know where they're coming from.
But a lot of them won't listen.
No, that's not true. That's not true. They will listen. Whether or not they'll change or not, that's a different issue. But a lot of them will. They will listen once they have assessed that you're for real. If they get to the point where they feel that, well, I can't trust him, or I can't trust her, and I don't think this person is genuinely concerned about me, then you're right, they won't listen.
Well, usually if somebody's going against you or something, you don't trust them.
Well, when you come across in a way when you're talking to them in a way that, look, I'm just interested in your well-being, You know, I'm not downing you. I'm not criticizing you. I'm not saying that you are a terrible person. What I'm saying to you is that I see people around you dying, and I don't want you to die. I see people around you going to jail, and I don't want that to happen to you. Let's see how we can work it out so that that doesn't happen. Let's do this together, man. You know, that's different than coming and criticizing. Look, you ain't about nothing right now. You know, you ain't about nothing. You'll never be nothing. I don't like people like you. You know, let's change. You know, no, I'm not changing nothing. And you got 15 seconds to get out of here. You know, that's their attitude.
To finish up, I'd kind of like to do something a little different. I'd like to ask you guys a question. When I was growing up, we had groups and things, but we never had to worry about this as much as you do. How many of you guys have had to go through a metal detector, either in school or at a concert or at a football game or anything? What's that like?
All right, unless you have change in your pocket.
I mean, that's something I never got to experience.
It's like they don't trust you. They're doing this because, well, first of all, anybody could have a gun. Anybody could have a knife. So what they're saying, what the adults are portraying to us, what I think is like, we don't trust you, because if you come in here, if you don't have like, what if you just have like nail clippers? But that could be to them that could be like an object to kill somebody with, you know, no matter what.
Something that you had mentioned was about the colors and that they've bought them all up. How many of you pay attention to what colors you buy when you go to the store and buy clothes now?
I don't.
I buy what I like.
Buy what you like?
As far as the metal detectors goes, that's more or less, I've been through airports a lot, so I got used to it, so it doesn't really affect me. But I guess it could be affecting a little bit, you know, of a trust factor.
Is that something you should be used to?
Yeah. But I mean, nobody really in America trusts anybody else anymore, even their own neighbor.
Well, let me ask you this question. In your community, where you live, do you have to be concerned about what colors you wear?
Not in my community, I don't.
What about in yours? What about in yours?
No.
What about in yours? What about in yours? See, and that's the difference.
It's starting in
That's
mine.
the difference. Because see, in the communities or the kids that I work with, you know, every day, yeah, they have to be conscious about what colors they wear.
It's
So
starting.
that's why you can go to the store and buy any color you want. You know, you still have that freedom. They don't. They don't.
It's starting in my community, but I really don't care what color I wear. Even if it would move in, wouldn't affect me.
I would like to believe that that's true, but I think that when you start seeing people dying around you because of what they have on, that does have an effect. It does have an effect, and that's what's happening in the city. You know what I mean? When you go to school, they have to be careful about what they're wearing or who they talk to, you know, because, well, I live in this community and he lives in that community, and even though, you know, he and I, we grew up together, and you know, just because he moved away and we're living in two different communities now, I can't say anything to him. You know, we can't really be close with each other anymore. I mean, in some cases, it's actually like that. You know, there are some kids now that are in the city who have decided, hey, look, it's just not for me. I'm not about gang banging, and I'm never going to be about gang banging, so I'm going to do what I want. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of resistance. But if you have it that way in your community right now, where you can wear what you want and you can do what you want to do, hey, keep it that way. Prevent it from coming in. Prevent it from coming in.
I'd like to thank all you guys for being here, and I'd like to thank Mr. Harrell for coming down and talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
This program is produced in cooperation with American Cablevision.